And I got to be honest with you. Typically, I start a show of Take the Stage with one sort of question for our guests. And as I was prepping for this specific conversation, as I always do, typically I take ChatGPT on a run with me and I sort of use it as a brainstorming coach. I think a lot about that opening question, almost obsess over the opening question. I got to be honest in saying I don't necessarily know where to start with this one. And you and I, we're going to be talking about owning the room in 2026. And why I don't necessarily know where to start is as I was preparing for this conversation, I don't know if it's easier or harder to own the room in 2026. And the reason I say that, and I want to provide a little bit of context for the listener, I think it's easier in the sense of there is so much AI slop and garbage and fake content in the world right now that I think it's easier to stand out and own the room in a digital landscape. Personal landscape at a networking event, we'll certainly talk about that as well. In the same respect, though, I think it's harder than ever to stand out because there is so much noise that is just surrounding us everywhere we look. So I want to get your thoughts from that standpoint. Is it easier or harder to own the room in 2026?
Yeah. Thanks, Brad. Firstly, thank you for having me on the podcast.
You
I'm
got
really
it.
excited to have this conversation. I think it's very important and very timely to talk about this. I've been recruiting for, gosh, I'm going to date myself, I'll say over 20 years. It's been longer than that. So I've seen everything. I've seen, I started out on this journey before Google, before job boards, before a cell phone. I started, without a cell phone. So I've seen a full gamut. And now, in 2026 with AI and all of the tools that we have, I would say to answer your question, I think it's harder to stand out without doing your homework. And there's so many tools and AI and research that we can do that we can use to make it easier to stand out. So your question, I think it's yes and no. I think that, without a strategy and without really focusing on what you're wanting to accomplish, it's definitely harder. But if you do the homework and do the pre-steps, I mean, it's just, unlimited opportunity in the recruiting industry to stand out in 2026.
What does that homework look like?
Yeah. Um, the first thing I think that we all need to do in the recruiting industry is really
Hmm.
stop and think about what we want to accomplish. Like, what is our strategy? Who are we really trying to target? Because I see with a lot of recruiters, me included, like I talk about all of this and it's because I've made a lot of mistakes over the years. And that's how I've learned. Like you don't learn unless you actually go through it. I think that many times recruiters try to be everything to everyone. I know I've done that in the past. And I think now it's really important in 2026, like we need to stop and we really need to think like, okay, who is our, that target that we're going after, our ICP? Who is it that we're trying to attract? And start with that strategy piece, and we can talk more about it. But definitely the strategy. And then, okay, once I know who I'm really going to go and target, how am I going to go and approach those people? And what are my strategies I'm going to use to not only connect with them directly, but right now we really want to attract, and it's very possible with all the tools and all the things that we're doing to attract the right person instead of having to go hunt that person. It should be a combination of both.
Let's stick on the wave of finding that ICP, that ideal customer
Yeah.
profile or ideal candidate profile, whatever it might be, whether you're selling or on the recruiting side of things. Why do you think it's commonplace for us to sort of try to attract everybody? Why don't
Yeah.
staffing firms or recruiting firms laser in?
Yeah. I think it's a little bit of sometimes we have clients, for example, that we have had relationships with in the past, and they come to us and they say, hey, can you help me with this search?
Mhm.
And if we don't have those defined boundaries, it's very easy to say, sure, I'll help you find. For example, we do technical recruitment, and sometimes we'll get the one off where they need to hire a salesperson that's not in the technical area. And I think the easiest thing to do is to say yes, sure, I'll help you with that. but that can also then take you down a totally different path, and you are starting to recruit people that you normally don't recruit, and you're building another pipeline, and it's taking you away from really, like, focusing on what your main target is. So I think that's, one thing. I think we can get distracted with everything coming in. I think as recruiters, we're very reactive instead of being proactive. And a lot of
Yeah.
times it's because our clients are coming to us, they have a need. I always think of myself as like I'm the 911. Like usually my clients will reach out to me when they have a position open, they have to get it filled quickly. They haven't been able to find someone on their own, and they're calling like 911,
Hmm.
right? So we're very, I think a good recruiter, we need to be reactive. That's part of our job. But again, sometimes we forget, okay, we need to be proactive. And that's when that strategy comes in, and really knowing like, this is what I do really well, and have the ability to say, no, this is not what we do, to have that boundary.
Yeah, I think it's also looking at the data and looking at what it is that you do really well. And there's probably a lot of people listening who maybe are in a couple different verticals and they assume that their business is in these three verticals without actually knowing where their sweet spot is, where their time to fill is low, where, the time to find the right candidate or the right talent is low, where the actual submittal rate to actual placement rate is high. Actually looking at those numbers and looking at the data and saying, you know what? Yes, we do these sort of three things, but we should just specialize here because this is our sweet spot. And having the courage to say this is our sweet spot.
Yes, I agree completely. I'm reading a book right now. It's called The Science of Scaling,
Okay.
and they talk about that a lot. They talk about, it's by Darren Hardy, that you have to have that courage to say, no, this is not what we're doing. Even if you're doing it
Hmm.
good and
Yeah.
you have good production, if you look at the numbers, there's times where you have to let go of something good to be great in an area where you are excelling, but you could be, 10 times what you are currently at,
Letting go of the good to be great. I mean, that'll take us down a completely different path here.
right?
I think
Yeah,
is incredibly difficult. Uh,
it is very hard.
and that's just not business oriented. That's personal lives. That's everything. If you're to be exceptional at something, um, it's almost putting the blinders onto everything else that you do, right? You need to punt everything else to say, listen, this is what I do, this is what I specialize in, this is my focus area. Whether again, that's personal life, business, and I think that makes complete sense. Um, if we have okay, so we've identified our ICP, we know who our ideal customer profile is or our ideal candidate profile, whoever that individual is. Where do we then go in terms of the homework, as you were alluding to next? What's the strategy look like?
Yeah. So I think it's really important to, I always think of it as like a bullseye. Many times as recruiters, we try to, and I think that all the tools that we have are, a lot of them are about hitting people that are strangers that we don't know. So we're setting up automation, we're sending emails, to people that we don't know, that have no connection to us. And we're kind of hoping and praying that the right person's going to get that email. It's kind of the opposite. It's what we really need to look at is what's that bullseye. So in the target, in that bullseye, it's like, who do I already know that already likes and trusts me, and start there. And it seems and sounds really simple, but most of the time we're trying to go way outside to strangers and not go, okay, who's my next door neighbor? Where do they work? Are they a hiring manager? So it's like literally starting, who do I know who likes and trusts me, which is either current clients, clients that I've had over the past several years, people that I'm first connections with. I've seen a lot of recruiters where they're doing LinkedIn campaigns, and they do it all to people that aren't their first connections. Like they eliminate the first connections and they go to the second and the third. And those are important. And that's kind of like the long game. We definitely want to do that. But I think that we need to put more of our attention on, okay, who's already in our circle that we can make an immediate impact with. So
Yeah.
that's definitely like one of the steps in the strategy for sure.
You are speaking my language. I think we as an industry too often chase new logos. We chase the new shiny client and we overlook the millions of dollars in business that is sitting right in our database. We're
Absolutely.
constantly chasing. new logos, new businesses. We're looking for how to grow our organizations that way instead of just having a casual conversation with the current clients that we already work with on how we can better serve them and how we can provide better service to them and how we can get more business from them. Um, I haven't in my 13 years figured out why that is the thing that we do, but it is typically what I see as well over here at Haley.
Yeah, I feel like we try to make it harder, even though we know we need to, work smarter, not harder.
Yeah.
I think it's human nature. If it's too easy, we think something's wrong. So I think one of the first things that we can do is, have those conversations like you were just saying with clients. And one of the most powerful questions we can ask is just, what else? Like, what else do you have going on? Or what else do you need help with? We forget to ask simple questions when we're already on the phone, we're already, in conversation with our clients. And it, like you said, it's like right there. We just have to ask the right question and listen and follow up with those existing clients as well. So, yeah, I
Being an
agree with you
observant listener
completely.
on a call, I think is critical as well. It's almost like in a lot of ways, whether on the sales side of things or the recruiting side of things, we're entering a call knowing what we have in mind, the desired outcome that we want. And I think if we flip that logic and try to just have a casual conversation, and I'm not saying interview the person on the other end of that phone, but just be an observant listener and take them down the path of where they want to go, I think it'll one, uncover what their current real challenges, their real pain point, but it'll also uncover the extras that they're not going to uncover or unearth if we just take them down the path that we want to go on.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think that I always say I love listening. Like that's one of my superpowers is that I feel like I'm a good listener. But sometimes as recruiters, we feel like we have to lead the conversation. We're usually outgoing and extroverted and, love to talk. But it's also good to know, how they always say, like, you should really be listening way more than you're talking in a sales context or even when you're, working with your candidates too. It works the same way. I mean, you get so much information that can actually help you with a search just by listening, like let them talk. And then, be able to follow up with questions based on what they, what they're saying to you. You can find out so much.
I had Mark Winter on the show, I think 2 years ago at this point, and Mark had mentioned that he plays a game with himself on every call of how little can I actually talk on this call. And that's something that he does religiously. And I've tried to adapt to that sort of personality and I'm getting better at it. But again, he plays this game where how little can I say on this call to just ask the right question to get my client or prospect or whoever might be on the other end of that call to open up. And from there, let the note taker sort of take the notes and go with it. But I like that mentality of how can I be an active listener without owning the conversation? I mean, whether it's over Thanksgiving or any sort of family dinner, whatever it is, no one wants to hang out with a family member that's constantly talking and making it me, me, me. And we don't want to be that recruiter on the phone either, right? We want to be that active listener. We want the candidate to feel like it's in it for them and the client to know that it's in it for them.
I think there's studies that have been done where the less that that person talks and the more you let someone else talk, they're going to think that conversation is amazing even though they did they did all
Yeah.
the talking. But a lot of times people, they don't have someone to just listen. And so it can be, good for them. They walk away with a positive experience, and you have all this information now that you can use either to help them find the right person or, to find the right job. So,
Okay.
yeah.
We got our ICP. We're now going after possibly as the strategy number one, current customers or people that are, next door neighbors, people we know, people that know, like, and trust us. Where do we go from there?
Yeah. So I think it's important to, really have that mindset of like start small, start narrow. So have your expertise and really know what you are good at, like we talked about, and stay in that. And then it's kind of a two-prong approach. It is LinkedIn, it is the messaging. What I've seen too, when I look back through all of my placements for the past few years, most and even to this day, most of my placements and my team's placements have been through referrals. So again, it's looking at, who are the people that like, know, and trust me, and then who do they know? But being in person, even today, I think is really, really important. So if I look back through of all my placements, not only have they been referrals, but if I look back through who referred me, it's from an in-person meeting. And for me, because I do talk to, I talk all day long to people, candidates, clients. And if you really look back, I think that's a huge indicator that being present, showing up, being consistent in that message and that narrow message, those are the key things that are really going to propel someone forward this year.
Yeah. Do you think being present is a differentiator in a world that is going to shift now more digital, more AI?
Absolutely. Yeah. Since COVID, I think that, a lot of us went remote, our
Hmm.
teams went remote. We kind of got, I guess comfortable, is a good word for it because
Yeah.
I used to have a big office. All my team was there. After COVID, we all went remote, but for 20 years, we had a brick and mortar office. We were in the office every single day. After COVID, we had to, I think for probably a couple years, we were in that remote world. Um, but at the end of the day, we found that my team was more productive if they were, wherever they wanted to be. And we could also hire across the country. So we have, recruiters across the country, and it does work. But I think people have forgotten a little bit of, the meetups, the associations, like where can you get plugged in and show up in person? Because those are the places that people are going to remember you.
Is now a good time to talk about in person and owning the room? Or do you have more to talk about strategy?
Yeah.
Because I know you're talking about associations. It feels like a good jumping off point,
Yes.
but I don't want to derail your
Yeah.
train of thought either. Um,
Yeah.
COVID shook a lot of things up, right? So I go out and I speak for Haley. I can only speak on myself in terms of actually going into a room and trying to network at this point. I
Yeah.
I get the feeling that COVID shook a lot of things up in the sense of physical being in a room is different. It's easy to kind of hide behind Zoom and have a conversation. You almost get a different sense of empowerment than when you're face to face with somebody. And I think you alluded to this a little bit. We've almost lost that art of how to be extroverted. We've almost lost the art of how do I approach somebody over a coffee or lunch or whatever it might be at an association or at a job fair, a career fair, whatever it might be. And I'm not only speaking for myself, but I observe it and I see it at the associations and the conferences that I go to. There's a lot of little sub pockets of people. And I feel like pre-COVID, it was just sort of one big sort of group having a conversation. And now it's more or less these sub pockets of, oh, I know you. I'm going to kind of hang off to the side and talk to you because I know you. Are you sort of seeing the same?
Hey, a quick pause before we get back to the show, because this is something every staffing leader needs to hear. Most staffing firms are spending a lot on benefits and still only covering about half of their workforce. That's exactly why I like what my friends at Benefits in a Card are doing. Instead of forcing owners into expensive, bundled health plans, they offer unbundled benefits designed for high turnover workforces. Things like free prescriptions through their free RX program, dental, vision, virtual urgent care, and supplemental coverage with no deductibles. The result? You can offer benefits to 100% of your workforce, control costs, and actually improve retention. If benefits have felt like a losing game, check out my friends at benefitsinacard.com and schedule a quick unbundled benefits review. Again, that's benefitsinacard.com. All right, let's get back to the show.
I would say, yeah, I mean, the past year, like I haven't been to a lot of like
Mhm.
association meetings. What I'm trying to do, and this is kind of like the small and narrow, I find that's been super effective for me. So I'll give you an example of how, and this was pretty strategic. It was something that I really felt this is going to make an impact. And this is kind of that strategy piece that I was talking about. We do technical placement in Phoenix. That's our main focus. So I really looked at it and I thought, okay, who do I know, in the industry that I can leverage that relationship? Who do I need to get back in touch with that maybe I'm not having, regular conversations with. And so I started to do research and I found, um, and again, this was like I was looking for it. So I'm like, what associations, what can I do to get really plugged into my local market? Again, with that like small and narrow, we do technical. We love working with startups. And I found an association where I knew someone that he had his own software company and we staffed for years their developers. So I had a relationship with him, but we hadn't, talked for a long time. And so I re-engaged and found out he was the new CEO for one of the startup communities in Phoenix. And through a lot of conversation, it just really mirrored like all the values that my recruiting firm focuses on. And we really wanted to be a part of this community. So it was almost like you have to look at things where um, you have that passion and excitement for what they're doing and like insert yourself. Like, how can I get entrenched, on purpose with this association? So after a lot of conversations, I just was like, anything that we can do as a company to get awareness, like we're not talking about placements, we're talking about relationship. Like, what can we do to help you? And so that just comes from just being, just genuine and just wanting to be a part of it, however that looks. Because over the years, I've really found that if you do that, everything comes, like the money comes, the relationships, the placements, all of those things, if you just, kind of start there. So, and then I got a call, I think it was December. He reached out to me. They were doing a summit and he was like, "Hey, I know we were just talking. We have a summit in a couple weeks. Can you come and be on the panel?" And I don't know for sure, but I think they might have had someone that was supposed to be on the panel and they
Mm-hmm.
couldn't make it. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm always like, yes, like I'm the step in, I'm ready, I'm,
Yeah.
and Brad, you and I did that too, because you reached out to me and you were like, "Hey, someone couldn't make it on the podcast. Can you do a podcast tomorrow?" And I was like, "Yeah,
Yeah.
I can do that,"
Yeah.
because that's where the opportunity, like you have to be ready and prepared and just jump, right? So that was what I did for this podcast. But it's also what I did with that association. So I was like, awesome. I'm going to be able to be in front of all of these startup companies. We're going to talk about hiring. And when I showed up, there was probably maybe 100 people. But just being on a panel, and that's another thing that I wanted to make sure that we bring up on this podcast. It's about not only being there, but going in as the, quote, authority. Like, how can you literally create that for yourself wherever you are, even if it's just one event, with 100 people, or a podcast that's going to reach a large community. But it's like starting there, because most people won't do that, or they don't want to, you know so from that, when we went to that panel, we had to switch on a dime, because instead of hiring leaders, it was more candidates. So again, it's like just being able to jump in. I'm like, all right, let's talk about, I know all about candidate struggles and what's going on in the
Mm-hmm.
market. So we switched it, and I got a lot of people that reached out. Even just, the other day was like, it was a candidate. He was like, "Hey, I saw you on that panel. I meant to come up. Can we get on a call?" And we also got a client, because a client came up. And what's so interesting, it was a client that I had been targeting all year last year
Yeah.
to get into.
Yeah.
And one of the hiring leaders came up and said, "I think I need to talk to you." And when I found out it was that company name, I'm like, that is so interesting, because I've been trying so hard to get in with this company, but
Yeah.
being in person, and being seen as that go-to, I was attracting that client without having to, you know, do another cold call. So
Yeah.
I think there's lots of ways that we can insert ourselves with associations. Um, like the Business Journal in every city is a good place too. They're always looking for people to help spread the word of what they're doing, or to lend like a hand in an article that they're writing. It just kind of takes like a different mindset to to turn it on to like, how can I show up as that go-to person?
Have you read The Third Door by Alex Banayan?
I'm reading it right now. I'm
Yeah.
like halfway through. It's an amazing book,
One of my
right?
favorites. One of my favorites. And
Yes.
I think what you were alluding to there, though, of getting on the stage, being on a panel, then that individual in the room seeing you that way, you're cold calling, you're
Mhm.
prospecting, you're doing your sales outreach with this individual, and they're completely ignoring you. That's the first
Yeah.
door in. The second could be a
Yeah.
referral, right? Somebody else could have sort of referred you to this individual, and maybe that's your second door in. But there's always a third door, right? There's
Yeah.
always a third door in, and I think you sort of unlocked that third door by being on that panel in that situation. And I think speaking and sort of being the authority in a room can always be the third door if you have the courage to get on stage and do it. And I think that the unlock there is there's a difference in being in the room and owning the room. How do you propose, I guess, the individual who's listening now saying, yeah, that sounds great, but that's not me.
Yeah.
I could never get on stage and do that.
I think it is a mindset shift, right? And we all have to continue to get uncomfortable. I think that's the first thing. I am like that so much. I mean, I have to constantly challenge myself to be uncomfortable. And sometimes people are like, but you've been doing this for so long. Like, if you don't consistently do something and you revisit it later, you're always starting a little bit rocky and shaky. So I think it's good to know that even people that have been doing it for a long time or seem like they have everything together, it's just that they're telling themselves they can do it and just, taking that jump. We all feel the same way. It's a matter of like not letting your emotions dictate what you're actually going to do. So you can feel nervous, you can feel like, I don't want to do this. But if you show up and do it anyway, you're going to get the result that you're looking for. And then you're going to gain more confidence to want to go and do it and be like, that's not so bad. Let me see what else I can do.
Yeah,
So, yeah,
I heard
right.
someone at one point say the nervousness or that sort of anxiety feeling that you get before a big moment. Some people say that as it's the body's way of telling you run away. What you should see that as is a moment to unlock and say, no, this is my body getting ready for what I'm about to do. That's me saying, listen, it's time to go. Um, and I think it's interesting there is most people will take that as fear and say, okay, I'm never doing that again. And they run. I'll let you in a little bit behind the scenes for me, right? So I host a show. I speak frequently, probably 2 to 3 webinars a month. I go out and travel probably 7, 8 times a year. I cannot be in the room for the speaker ahead of me. I don't know if it's a little bit of imposter syndrome. I don't know if it's a little bit of just I shouldn't be on the same stage as that person. I physically cannot be in the same room. Let's say you and I were speaking at the same event. If I was the 12 o'clock slot and you were the 11 o'clock, even though I know you, I could not be in that room. I usually leave. I'll have a water, coffee, whatever. And I don't even rehearse. It's not like I'm going through slides or going over what I'm going to say. It's more or less just sort of zen and kind of mellow out. But I physically won't be in the room before my talk. It's just how I need to operate. And that's what works for me. Because I tend to think I am pretty extroverted, but there are moments where you still get that sort of, yeah, can I really do this? And for me, that 3 to 5 minutes leading up to it is where I need to just sort of be alone to say, okay, it's go time. Let's get to work.
Yeah, I feel the same way. It's kind of like I have to have my own blinders on and just, focus on what I'm doing, what I want to say, just kind of like be in my own thoughts instead of like comparison. Cause I'll do the same thing, whether it's like, I know we were talking about you doing like marathons and races, and I used to do bodybuilding. And I just remember when I would go to a competition, it would be really easy to be like, oh, what, like that person looks amazing. Like, what am I doing up here? But I just remember like when I went in, I'd be like, okay, I'm focusing on me and I'm going to go in with the right mindset, the right mentality, and just not look at like what anyone else is doing. And so, yeah, I think you can do that whether it's, going and speaking, or I think for some people too, I know I'm like this. It's one thing to have to go up and stand up and give a presentation, and have it scripted, but it's another thing if you're doing like like being on a panel where you're just talking and sharing what you see in the market. That's totally different. And so I think for anyone listening, if they wanted to do like You kind of like start out with something like we've been talking about, something small, like just being on a panel, where there's other people with you, right? And then you kind of like gain your confidence, and then you can go to the next thing, right? But yeah, and I think too, Brad, sorry to interrupt you. I know you
No,
were
no,
trying to
no,
say
go.
something. I think, there's one thing too to like insert yourself into someone else's association, but you can also like create your own. You can create your own little meetup with some like potential hiring managers or candidates, or I mean, you can get very creative. um, in fact, I think you might know Diane Prince. She's spoken for Benjamin Mena, but she's in Arizona. And we have a couple other recruiters that we get together quarterly. And Diane reached out to me. She's like, "Hey, do you want to, start a hiking group for entrepreneurs?" I'm like, totally. Like we love being outside. We want to meet new people. So we started that a couple months ago. So it's like if nothing's out there that you feel drawn to, then maybe just start your own something small, you know?
That is also the third door. If a
Yeah.
group that you're trying to attract doesn't exist, make it, and make the association, make the group. Um,
Yeah.
how else might we own the room? So I do think there's a difference in being in the room and actually owning it. So when you look at staffing and recruiting becoming increasingly competitive, whether you're owning the room in the digital room or you're owning the physical room, what else do you think the average recruiter is missing, or the average sales rep or the average owner is missing right now when they show up to an event, or again, the digital room when they post on LinkedIn? What are they missing that you've sort of
Yeah.
unlocked that's been impactful for you?
Yes, I'm totally glad that you brought that up. Um, I think the other thing is that we aim too low on the type of person and who we're targeting. So I think, when you're looking at, who do I want to target and who do I want to go after, um, you know, aim high, aim for that CEO, reach out directly to that person instead of trying to get in with, a mid level manager. You can do that too. But I found personally, like my success has been to reach out directly to the CEO. So that's who I'm reaching out to. And most people are not doing that. So, how there's that quote, what is it? Something about like the last mile is like, I can't think of it. It's something like the road less traveled,
Hmm.
is usually like where people it's it's less crowded, like the higher up that you go. I can't think of the quote, but that's been extremely successful for me, for sure.
I had Tom Erb on the show a while ago, and he talked about something similar in that typically when you do cold outreach or you reach out for a conversation, you shoot at your level. So if you are a junior level recruiter within a new organization, you'll shoot for that junior level HR rep because you feel peer to peer. They'll want to talk to me because we're on the same wave. And he actually said the same thing, that it's a lot less noisy the higher you go up the pole. And it makes a lot more sense to shoot high and then get pushed down instead of pushing or shooting low and trying to push up. Because typically people aren't going to, within an organization, push you up to the CEO for a conversation, but the CEO is going to say, "Hey, I'm not right for this conversation. Talk to so and so." They'll delegate down. So I think that makes a ton of sense as well. There's also some fear there, though, right? So if you're a recruiter or you're new in your career, shooting high, you got to have a little bit of an ego with that. I think you got to have a little bit of an ego if you want to go for that approach. How do you propose people do that?
I don't know if it's ego. I mean, it
Courage.
definitely could, but yeah, courage. I like that. And I think it just really goes back to, I mean, it sounds kind of silly, but practicing like every day, do something where you're uncomfortable, right? And then as you go, you're getting used to making uncomfortable conversations, And I think reaching out through LinkedIn, I mean, the power of LinkedIn, we're able to message anyone. Before, when I first started out, it was hard to even find someone's contact information. You'd have to call in, to try to get in touch with them. But there's a lot that you can do through messaging. as long as I think that the message is very personal, like you don't want to spam, especially, CEOs of companies that you want to get into. But I think that if you have that strategy of like, how do I want to reach out to this person and what do I want to say and do it, very individually, I think that, I've been successful at getting into CEOs, having conversations, or going back to that bullseye, that we talked about at the beginning. Like, who do I know? And it might not be that it's in a client, but it could be in a personal relationship, like someone, on your kid's baseball field, perhaps is, a CEO that you want to meet and talk to. So I think that there's different ways to get into it if you kind of set that strategy up.
All right, so let me kind of summarize real quick and tell me if we're missing anything. So, step one, identify that ICP. Step two, have a strategy with who you want to reach out to and understand how you're going to reach out to them, whether that's in person. I know we talked both advocating for bringing more of the in person meetups back and not just relying solely on automations or digital means. We talked a little bit about owning the room in the sense of doing what you can to actually speak and own the stage. Have some sort of presentation or panel where you can own the room and not just be in the room. What are we missing? What else is sort of that unlock to the listener right now where if you want to own the room and actually cause a ripple effect in your area in 2026, what might they do? What haven't we talked
Yeah.
about?
I think, being consistent in follow up is definitely the missing piece where you want to do all of that initial things, all of the initial things that we were just talking about, but then you have to be consistent. You have to keep following up in different means. And the messaging that you're giving out needs to be consistent as well. So it's not only reaching out, several times, 6, 7, 8, 9, continuing to follow up. But then when you are on, for example, LinkedIn, if they're going to look at your messaging, and I know Brad, you're an expert at this and in this space, but the messaging and what you're saying on LinkedIn needs to be consistent with every touch point that they've experienced with you. And I think that's, you do that, you're going to see results.
Yeah, we've learned it takes 72 touches is the average now
What?
for someone to
No.
turn a cold lead into somebody that you're actually having a conversation with. I'm sorry, let me phrase that differently. It's 72 touches for someone to fundamentally know you exist. I'm sorry, I said that wrong the first time around. 72 touches for someone to fundamentally know that Brad's widget company is on this planet. That's not to get the
Wow.
conversation, that's not to get the order. That's just for them to know that you're fundamentally on the planet. The challenge with that is 90% of sales reps give up at the fourth attempt. We're
Yeah.
human. We don't like hearing no. We don't like being ghosted. We don't like reaching out via cold call and not having someone return our phone call or our email, whatever it might be. So we give up. 90% give up at the fourth attempt. But it takes 72 touches for someone to fundamentally know that your company is on this planet. It becomes a numbers game. So I think it's consistently following up with the right message at the right time. You don't know when someone's going to have that need, right? You even articulated that. You spoke at a panel, and a couple months later, I think it was, you said 6 months to a year later, now somebody's reaching out saying, hey, you might be the right fit for our hiring need. It wasn't when they saw you on the panel, but they had some sort of loyalty to you when you spoke. That then creates trust, creates familiarity. So when they are hiring, they know to pick up the phone and call you. But
Right.
it's that repetition, it's that consistency that creates loyalty, creates trust, and then ultimately creates somebody that wants to have a conversation with you. Um,
Yeah, absolutely.
but it takes time. It takes a lot of time.
Yeah. That number surprises me because I remember it was like, I don't know, 10 touches.
Yeah.
So 72.
Yeah. So it's ASA. So at Staffing World last October, someone on stage said it was 50-ish. And then Brad Smith, our chief strategy officer, was at an AS group meeting, and one of the CMOs in the room, they track all of their data points, and they had said that their numbers are closer to 70 to 72 touches. And that's not to say that you need to be cold calling or having in-mail 72 times. That's, maybe your 10 to 15 step sales process. That could be pay-per-click advertising that's surrounding these people. So they're seeing your brand through ads. That could be email automations that are also dripping on these people, be physical postcards, things like that are dripping on these prospects. It's more than just the sales touches. It's the marketing in my world that then overlays all of those sales touches that gets you closer to that number.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, it's definitely a several touch point process,
Yeah.
right? So, yeah.
Sharon, before I give you the floor to share a little bit about yourself and the finders, anything that you wish we talked about on this episode that we didn't get to?
No, I think you brought up some good points about mindset, because mindset in my view is, 80% of what we do every day. It really is so important. So I just want to encourage people, mindset is huge, and I think that you just have to practice and make sure that you're focused on, the strategy and all the things that we talked about, but then also just, you know, really put yourself out there, because the opportunity is amazing.
What does mindset mean to you?
Yeah. I think it's the way that we talk to ourselves and what we're thinking. It's really easy, I think, in our industry to get frustrated, to think, oh, it must be me. They must, if you make a call and no one calls you back, or they tell you you don't want something, I think sometimes people take it personally, to think, oh, I'm not a good salesperson. They don't like me, whatever. So it's really about having that inner thought process that, I am going to make progress. I am going to be consistent. I'm going to show up, doing all the things that we talked about, and leaving the emotion out of it. It's not you. It's the process that you have to follow.
I repeat to myself all the time, progress, not perfection. Um, and it's something that I've ingrained in myself along with keep showing up. As a runner, I'm going through another training block now for the Buffalo Marathon over here. And it's just one of those things where it's like every day you have to show up. And I'm learning that more and more. And you're going to have off days. Certain runs aren't going to feel the way they should. And you got to figure out sort of what happened. But I've learned that if you keep showing up and you value progress over perfection, things start to tip in the right way. But
Mhm.
I mean, that took me a few years to figure out. And I think the average recruiter, the average sales rep isn't probably having that mindset.
Yeah.
It is really tough to sell staffing services right now. It's really tough to sell recruiting services right now. And I think a lot of the industry is saying, well, I'm pretty good at selling. I could go sell soccer trophies. Right? Why
Right.
why am I going to keep doing this? And we're beating ourselves up over it. I think mindset, you're actually the second guest in a row that has mentioned mindset. So
Really.
something, the universe is saying something to me on this one, which is
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, and I love that you brought up, your running, because I feel like you can, when I was talking about practicing, if you practice in your personal life with something, to get uncomfortable, it's easy to do that every single day. That can translate into your business. So I know when I started competing and really getting out of my comfort zone, it translated into my business. Like, that was my business was like 5 times as far as revenue and production when I was going through my training for the first time. So I do feel like, yeah, it can really transfer, like, focus on you and like your personal aspect, and then that can also go into your business too.
I don't think we know how to be uncomfortable. I think we as humans want status quo. We want to just kind of wake up and go through the motions. We don't want to necessarily feel the uncomfortable feeling day to day. But I do agree with you that that's where growth comes from, right? It's having the 20 sales calls that go the wrong way and breaking them down, whether it's with a team member or even chat GPT, and saying, listen, what happened here? Like, what can I extract from this data? What can I learn from this so that I can get better? And it's having the courage to do that. I think if we're just going to repeat the process and say, it wasn't my week, these 20, 30 calls didn't go my way, let's do it again next week. I mean, that's a form of insanity.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with you completely, and I think, yeah, we wanna, be safe, right? So it's so much easier to, not go to an event, or not try to push yourself at the gym, or, running, an extra mile. But, yeah, it's really important, I think, that, people need to think about that if they wanna be successful in anything that they do. It's like getting uncomfortable, and you have to do that to grow.
Yeah, you mentioned going one more mile, and before
Yeah.
I turn the floor over to you and share a little bit about yourself, I'm a big
Yeah.
fan of Nick Bare, and his whole mentality is go one more. So if you have 5 miles on the day, how can you go 6? How can you give that
Mhm.
one extra rep if you're in the gym, or how can you make for the sales rep that one extra call today, or how can you screen one more resume or one more candidate? What can you do one more of? If everybody on your team is doing 20 today, how can you do 21? Just one extra rep of whatever it is to just go one more,
Yeah.
I think is the unlock for a lot of people. And if you adhere to that sort of mentality, I think it would unlock a lot of positivity for the industry.
Totally. And to surround yourself with people that think the same way, right? Because if you're around someone that's like one more, and then it's going to remind you, and you have a team around you of just like-minded people, that also is, you know, really, really important.
Sharon, before we get to our rapid fire round, tell us a little bit about yourself and the Finders.
Yeah. So, Brad, as I mentioned, I started the Finders. It was back in 1998. So I've seen, depressions and everything from, you name it. My firm, we started out just doing technical placement, but over the years, we organically grew. So we have 3 different divisions. We have tech, HR, and finance. And again, I stress organic, growth. So throughout the years, like we've been an Inc. 5000 company twice in a row. And it's all about really, building that team. It's not it's a marathon, right? Like what we were talking about. It's not a sprint. So we've grown, and currently, like within the last year and a half, we've changed our model. So we are now a brokerage model, kind of like real estate, where we have different independent recruiters that want to be a part of the Finders, and we're helping them build their own business within the walls of the Finders. So it's pretty exciting, and we're building that team that we were talking about of just really like-minded elite recruiters that want to grow.
If that sounds enticing to anybody listening, how can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, the easiest way is just LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn all day long. They can message me and we can go from there. Or my company, it's the-finders.com.
Got it. And
So
we will
that's our
link to your
website.
LinkedIn and the
Yeah.
website in the show notes.
If you're a staffing owner planning to scale in 2026, listen closely. For more than 35 years, Tricom has partnered with staffing owners to support growth without adding unnecessary risk or back office burden. Tricom is not a factoring company. They're an asset-based lender and full-service back office partner, building solutions tailored to your staffing business and cash flow needs. If growth is starting to create pressure around payroll, cash flow, or administration, Tricom provides the flexibility and operational support to help you expand with confidence. I trust their team and have known them for over a decade. To learn more, visit tricom.com and request a conversation to see how they support your staffing business. All right, let's get back to the show.
Sharon,
Thank you.
I got to run you through our rapid fire round real quick if you got another minute or two.
Yeah, sure.
One book that has fundamentally changed your life.
Yeah. I would say after all of these years, I always come back to the E-Myth. So it's about, I don't, are you familiar with the E-Myth?
I'm not.
Okay.
And it
So the
hasn't been
E-Myth.
mentioned yet on the show.
Oh, wow. Okay, so I'm old school. 'Cause I read it was one of my first books when I started my company, but basically it's by Michael Gerber, and it talks about how usually you're a technician, like for us it's recruiting. All of a sudden we'll have this, amazing idea to become an entrepreneur and start a recruiting company, and just the difference between, actually being an entrepreneur and a manager and a quote technician, and how you can scale your company from being a recruiter to owning a recruiting company.
Very good. We will add it to the book list. And one piece of advice that you would give to somebody just starting in staffing and recruiting, what are you going to tell them?
I would tell them to not give up, that like what we talked about, it's going to take a little bit of time. But there's so much opportunity with all of the things going on in the industry. It's still a wonderful place to be, and you really can create any life that you want as a recruiter.
Sharon, appreciate you coming on the show and sharing all your insights with us. It's great talking to you.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. Thanks for having me.